let's talk about Veep. So Veep wrapped up its final and seventh season last night, and boy, you've watched it in a pretty condensed
Yeah, I have.
time frame. I've been following it. I wasn't right on Veep when it first came out, but pretty quickly, I think I tuned in the second season or so. And I think there's a lot to say about Veep as a comedy in the times that it came through. But as someone that has watched it more recently, what's like your main takeaway of the show?
Yeah, I've watched the whole show this year. Very condensed. And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
watching the early seasons, the Armando Iannucci seasons in 2019, it is kind of funny that you see it like the before and the after of the show, before David Mandel took over as showrunner, where it starts off as an Obama era show. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a different kind of political joke making you do when you make that kind of show. And I think Veep started out as a very observational and obviously satirical take on modern politics, but it largely existed in contrast to something seemingly Shakespearean like House of Cards, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward a few seasons, House of Cards critically craters, obviously. Donald Trump shows up, then gets elected, and then you have the concern trolling that I remember being aware of, even though I watched the show. It's like, oh, how do you satire when the real satire is happening realistically right now? Like, how do you do it in the age of Trump? And it did feel
Yep.
like season 6, the first season that had any creation under the era of Trump, was still kind of finding its footing. Whereas season 7, which obviously just wrapped up a condensed season, took a while to get going, get shot given the cancer from Louis-Dreyfus. But I don't think it was the best season. I still think the early stuff is just like has the smartest writing. But I thought season 7 just gets super, super cutting and almost
Yep.
ups the ante on what it's satirizing. We're like, oh, well, if current events are this ridiculous, then I guess we just have to make our show more ridiculous. But because it's still smartly written and we've been with these characters such a long time, it pays off. I think the finale in particular is just fucking really cutting, but
Yep.
it does feel like a natural closing of Selena's arc. So yeah, even though I rushed through the show at a pace I wouldn't have liked to watch it at, I still was a big fan of the overall crust of the show, but even this final season as well.
You touched on a lot of really great points. I agree. The early season writing is just like unbelievable, but I do think the quality of writing, even when it dips a little bit, probably like after season 4, still stays at such a high level. And there's so many. It's kind of like another show we talked about recently, Arrested Development, where it's almost like levels to the jokes, where it's like if you weren't paying attention to this thing that happened in season 1 or 2, you're not going to get how the joke evolved in season 4 and now is presenting itself in season 7. And it's a really class act, I think, in terms of how you write a show and how you develop characters over time and how you introduce other characters into the mix as well. Someone like Richard is a character that was introduced in the mid seasons. I think it was like season 4, maybe. And he just I think he became one of my favorite characters on the show.
Yep.
His like dry, direct, kind of like dim-witted, but still really sharp humor was like such a refresher to like all the cutting and really just like mean-spirited humor throughout the rest of the show. He was really a breath of fresh air. One person who really I think has evolved throughout the show, and I'm not sure in the best way, but I think in a really effective way, was Jonah, played by Timothy Simons. And Timothy Simons probably is one of the biggest risers from this show, a relative unknown going into it, and now a pretty well-known actor within comedy spheres in Hollywood. His arc, he starts off as like a decently competent person in the beginning, and just like it's worn down into this like total caricature of idiot politics at this point. What did you think about his like character arc over the course of the 7 seasons? I mean, he marries his sister.
Yeah.
his
well,
actual sister.
well, he just starts out as like Jonad, right? He's just like the doof
Yeah.
that no one fucking respects, and that
Mhm.
certainly doesn't change. But I actually really liked how they had people using him uh, by running for office and pushing his
Yeah.
career. And I think it's just really funny. And because Simons is so uh, committed to the characterization of Jonah, he just delivers the lines so confidently that when people are ripping Jonah's asshole open, and then Jonah's just saying these matter of fact responses back and just taking it in stride, it's just some of the funniest things you've ever seen.
Yep.
And obviously you can make the comparisons to modern day politics and the way everything's very partisan and hostile these days. It obviously doesn't
Mhm.
not bring any news there, but having him just go like full tilt and like off the reservation, I thought it was pretty great because you had the levels, you had to keep leveling up
Yep.
in this new age, and he was kind of one of the more logical things to take to the next extreme. And it's still
I
funny the
agree.
whole time. Like if it wasn't funny, you know, maybe you don't laugh as much at his, kind of racist sentiments. Like obviously he's portrayed as a dick, so it's not like the show's endorsing
Mhm.
what he says, obviously, but he
Right.
says some fucked up shit. And I mean, then again, so does Selena's camp too. So I think you
Oh,
just kind of have to roll with it.
I mean, in the last episode, Selena's camp gives up gay marriage as a way of getting her the election. I mean, the last episode, like you said, I
Shout
think
out
really
Dick
wraps.
Cheney and Vice.
Yeah. Crazy. And good call on that. I didn't even make that connection. Thinking back to I think the ending was so perfect. Even before they do the 24-year time jump to
Mm-hmm.
after her death, is her uh, sitting alone in the Oval Office. Because I think if
Mm-hmm.
anything you take away from this show, it's that. Uh, as much as you might like Selena Meyer as a character because you find her funny, she really is pretty despicable as a
Yep.
human being.
Stands for
And
nothing. Will do anything.
exactly.
Yada yada.
And I think having her sitting alone, getting what she wanted, but still being, it seems pretty unhappy, was a perfect way to kind of show it. And it seems like that's kind of the overall message for everybody in the show, except for maybe Richard, honestly, who ends up being, it seems like the best president the United States ever has in this world. Um, how did you feel like they did landing the I guess the overall moral of the story?
Yeah, well, I think obviously the shot of her being alone kind of uh, drives it home. But right before that, Selena makes Gary the fall guy for the Meyer Fund,
Yep.
and Gary is without a doubt the most loyal person she's had for the decade plus that they were to get 20 years there together, whatever it was, and just kind of showing that the length she would go to get something she always wanted and always failed to achieve through her own incompetence and lack of leadership and ideas and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Having her truly like stab Gary in the back like that, uh, I liked it. Yeah, it's cutting.
And it
It's
made
hard, man,
sense. It
but it made
is.
sense.
And they do it in such funny ways, but when you really like break it down, it's really like it's a tragedy in a lot of senses. And we're going to be talking about an even bigger tragedy in terms of HBO show in a second. But I think I think if there was one episode of TV last night that really landed high expectations, I think it was Veep. So if you have a chance to go back, people are rewatch HBO shows a lot just because the quality of their catalog is undeniable at this point. But Veep is one that you shouldn't overlook.
Yeah,
And it's easy to watch. It's easy to get through.
yeah, testament to that. Yeah, I think ultimately like the thing that made Veep so fun, just episode to episode, is that the casting was just so great, and then
Mm-hmm.
combine that with the great writing, as we mentioned, and it just soars. But I mean, having like Gary Cole and Kevin Dunn as just side characters in the ensemble, guys that are just like comedy stalwarts that have been in the comedy making business forever, just
Mm-hmm.
having them like off the bench just delivering fucking funny jokes, like it's great. And then I think obviously Anna Chomsky won or nominated for hella Emmys as Amy, and I think Amy has a really great arc as she goes through a shit ton throughout the
Yep.
show, and Reed Scott as Dan, another guy that like the characterization is just so precise that you always really know where Dan stands on things, yet you still like watching him despite him being a insufferable person.
Each one of these characters are so distinct and like well thought out, and they never do anything that's really outside of their character, which I think is a testament to the writing, because they didn't have to sell themselves out to drive plot. They always had a way of writing around it, which I thought was great. Any other thoughts?
No, man, I'm happy I made the time to catch up. Like I think I did it in 2 months, maybe a little less. Thank God it's a half-hour show. But you can do it too.
Any lines or like anything from the show, any jokes from the show that really stand out to you as like their best? I have a line in particular that's coming to mind for me.
I mean, I don't remember any offhand, but the show produces legitimate laugh out loud moments, which is easier said than done. And I think early on, a lot of it's Jonah related, but I think by the end, I mean, it's basically everyone. Oh yeah, what did you remember?
I don't remember which episode, but Jonah at one point in the early season says, I'm eating so much pussy, I'm shitting clits, and that will forever be like my favorite line from the show.
Yeah.
Also, the way Timothy Simons delivers it is just like you said. It's so confident, and like he thinks it's like the funniest thing ever said. It's fantastic.